So the first lesson I have to say is, it's whenever America is involved, fewer people die, and that's a good thing, because the less blood that is shed, the easier it is to make compromises to make peace. It's also morally a good thing if young people don't die well before their time. Then the Bush administration changed, and I remember right before President Bush announced the roadmap, which was in the first term but didn't get really going until the second term. 4 days before he announced it, Arafat pops up and says, "I accept President Clinton's proposal." Hello? I mean, it was like, and I had gone to Tel Aviv University in 2001 and received permission from the Israelis to bring some of the Palestinians in to see me. This is a couple months after I left office, I don't know, springtime sometime. And they said, "What should we do?" I said, "Take the deal now. Do it right now." He said, "Well, Sharon won't give it to us." I said, "I don't care. You've got to start something, and that will at least change the thing." So instead, they debated it for 6 or 8 months, however long it was, until they waited till everyone knew President Bush was going to announce the roadmap. So by then, Arafat had an Israeli public that didn't trust him, an Israeli government that wouldn't deal with him, and an American government that wouldn't give him the time of day. Then he takes the deal. So, and I told him back when I was ready to leave office, and he called and thanked me and said what a great man I was. I said, "No, I'm not a great man, I'm a failure, and you made me one." I said, "The first thing I heard about you when I took office was that you never made a deal until 5 minutes to midnight. And as I leave office, I want you to know something. Your watch is broken. And you will come to regret this." So you all know what happened after that. Okay, so then he dies, new government gets elected. We make a little progress. Then there's a unilateral withdrawal from Gaza by Ariel Sharon, who by then has become a very different politician, even starts a whole new political party. And as far as I know, is the only place in the world where a political party was organized for the sole purpose of governance. That is, it did not appear to him that the Labor Party could get enough votes in the Knesset and that the Likud Party would ever permit serious negotiations. And he started a new party, the sole purpose of which was to permit a continuation of the peace process. And so they made some progress, and then the second tragedy occurred, next only to Rabin's death, was Sharon's stroke. So finally, when he became a convert with the strength to pull this off, he lost the physical ability to do it. I'll never forget, after the second event, I thought God was truly determined to play games with our minds till the end of time. So Mr. Olmert came in, and finally he proposed an agreement that was basically what I had proposed, but in even greater detail. But by then, because of his political standing, nobody took it seriously. President Bush's administration tried to do much better in the second term. I think they did. And after Hamas won the election in Gaza, they did a lot of work with the West Bank government and training security forces, which continues to the present day with real competent results. And I think that the Bush administration deserves a lot of credit for what they did for that. And I think the West Bank government, the Fatah government, deserves a lot of credit. But then we have this new election, and Mr. Netanyahu wins, and the Kadima party under Tzipi Livni decides not to go into the government, and Mr. Lieberman becomes prime minister, and all the internal contradictions that are present today are thrown into high relief, and we are where we are. President Obama gets elected on a promise to try to make peace in the Middle East, names Hillary the Secretary of State, and then accepts her recommendation to name George Mitchell as a special envoy, because we had been totally blown away by the way he handled the Irish peace process. And because he cared a lot about the region, because he's half Irish and half Lebanese. And he's a man of extraordinary energy for his age or any age. But I think it's worth looking now at what's different and what's not. You all know what's different. For the Palestinians, they now are divided. Who's Israel supposed to make a deal with after all? But I would just point out that a lot of people have forgotten this. Hamas won those elections in Gaza, not with the majority of the vote, with about, as I recall, 42% of the vote, because the Fatah were so confident of their hold on the voters in Gaza. After all, that's where Arafat's headquarters was, looking out on the Mediterranean, that their internal divisions were minimized, and they arrogantly went out and ran two different candidates from the two different factions in seat after seat after seat, and 42% was enough to beat them. If you go back and look at that election, there were very few of those seats where the Hamas candidate got a majority of the vote. And if we were on the verge of a constructive election tomorrow, a constructive agreement, and they had another election in Gaza, they wouldn't win if they only had one opponent. Meanwhile, the strength and the capacity of the West Bank government began to build. One of Israel's legitimate complaints was that Arafat might have been good at causing trouble, but he wasn't going to be very good at picking up the garbage, opening the schools, maintaining security, doing the things that a government has to do. It was legitimate to say we needed to increase the capacity. This is a general problem, I might say, in all poor countries throughout the world. If you look at this healthcare debate in America, you see our challenge is overcoming entrenched interests to keep changing after a lot of money's been divvied up among people who are good at keeping it. But in poor countries, the challenge is building capacity. We have the capacity, but once we misallocate for a long time, it's hard to change. And it's not just America, it's any advanced country. So that was a good thing. But here we are. So what's different? The divided government among the Palestinians. But it's best not to make too much of that, because if we ever had a real referendum against the backdrop of a peace agreement, I'm confident the government in the West Bank would win in Gaza as well. On the other hand, if we don't, they may not survive there. There's a story in the press today which I think is quite accurate about opposition building up in the grassroots to the Palestinian security forces because they accepted this new order and this new discipline, not only to be safer, but because they were told it was a prelude to a Palestinian state that would exist within 5 years, and they were told that, as I remember, 3 years ago. But, so you have more divided Palestinians. The second thing is, what's left, though, is both more honest and more capable than existed before in the West Bank. The Palestinian prime minister there is very good. And he left and he came back, and I think they're all working together pretty well.